animals don't get too hung up on reason. They just keep killing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. It's Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom.
Greetings and salutations, woodland slashers. I'm doing pretty well, Mike. How the hell are you doing?
I'm doing well. Settling in on the last day of the weekend before the work week begins again. So
I don't know what work is, so you're talking to the wrong guy.
One day you will join us back, and you'll get the fresh reminder of what it is like to get your soul sucked out of your body every week.
Well, let's hope.
All right. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
Okay. We are discussing In a Violent Nature. Announced that at the end of the last episode. This one, it dates back to getting some festival buzz last year, and it got. I'm not sure how wide the release is. I know it's released in quite a few places based on people talking about it. I saw it a couple days. My situation is kind of weird. The local theater that I always go to, my local Regal, they had the early screening on a web I saw, but then once it actually opens wide, it's not showing. It's kind of weird. So I got tickets, saw it, and I'll talk about it. I'll go off the IMDb. It's just over over 90 minutes, but if you include credits, it's probably like a straight up movie. When a locket is removed from a collapsed fire that entombs the rotting corpse of Johnny, a vengeful spirit spurred by horrific. His body is resurrected and becomes hell-bent on retrieving it. Were we hell-bent on our reaction to this movie? Let's find out. We'll start with our general thoughts. Venom, what do you think of In a Violent Nature?
All right. Before I get into that, to answer Mike's previous question about the release of this, In a Violent Nature opened on 1,426 screens nationwide. That's a little bit less than half of your average blockbuster. When blockbusters come out, they usually open on around 3,000 screens. Especially if they're available like in 3D and IMAX. So, sometimes that number might reach up to 4,000. So yeah, 1,400 it's still a nationwide release, but it's like I said, it's I wouldn't call it small. I'd probably call it like a medium size national release, because like a lot of independent film, they open in like less than 1,000 screens, for a lot of indie stuff. So I don't know. It's like in between indie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should have clarified. Like, my is still getting it. Like, it's still open in my city. But if I hadn't gone to like that early, I just would have had to like drive to like a Century or Cinemark or like one of the others. So it was wide enough to where my city still had it. But
right, I have seen a lot of people online complaining about they're not getting it in their city. Like a couple of fellow podcasters have actually posted that nobody, near them is actually screening the picture. So, I can see the issue. Yeah. I wouldn't expect this movie to play on 3,000 screens by any stretch anyway. It's a new IP, doesn't, have a lot of like, director clout behind it, blah, blah, blah. So yeah.
Yeah. And
14 to 1,800 screens, but yeah, 14's a little light, but it works. At least we got to watch it in the theater, And this is a
Yeah.
Shudder original too, so I mean, we could have easily been watching this in our living rooms. So for whatever it's worth, I'm happy it did get somewhat of a big national release. Okay, so to my general thoughts. This movie is a real mixed bag, and when I say that, I mean the movie does a lot of things really well, but then it does other things fairly poorly. So let me go over the things that I liked first. And I think first and foremost, the thing that most people are going to be talking about coming out of this movie are the kills. There's a couple of incredibly brutal kills in this movie that make a gorehound like me, you know, smile from ear to ear. There is one particular kill in this movie that, as of right now, June 2nd, 2024, is my kill of the year. This one particular kill, I literally let out an audible "oh shit" in the theater. I think I pissed off the Mexican kid sitting next to me, because the theater was packed, by the way. Even for a mid-afternoon AMC screening, the theater was fairly full. So, but yeah, that, like I said, that one kill I absolutely loved. Even though it does get a little hokey, I just absolutely adored it. And there's other kills in this movie too that are equally brutal. There's one kill in this movie involving a log splitter where there's no cut. Like, I don't see the cut. Literally see a human actor being put in position, and it's one shot. No cuts, no nothing. I mean, I don't know where the dummy cut is, but it's brilliantly done. So I'll give him credit for that. The killer himself, John. I liked John. I liked his mask. I liked his weapons of choice. I liked how his weapons and mask pertain to his backstory. Even though his backstory isn't necessarily something I'm going to praise, because it is fairly thin. But at the same time, again, with slashers, I don't necessarily need a whole lot of backstory. If you tell me there's a crazy guy in the woods killing people, I'm happy. That's all the explanation I need. But if you're going to give me a backstory, then, you know, make it a little bit more robust than the one we get here. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's a little thin. What else can I say about this? The camera work. There are some scenes in this movie where the cinematography is awesome. Absolutely awesome. There's one kill in this movie involving a hatchet, where the camera is literally above the action pointing straight down. So you're getting a bird's eye view, something I don't remember ever seeing. And we're actually watching the killer kill somebody with an axe, and then the camera follows him as he walks over. And like I said, the camera's directly above. It's so beautifully shot. And then when we get the second kill in that scene, the camera angle makes 100% sense at that point then, because it's just a glorious kill at the second kill in that scene is absolutely glorious. So, that's probably going to be the majority of the positives I have about the film. Now we have to get into the negatives. And there are two major issues that this movie has. The first one is pacing. The pacing in this movie is terrible. Now, obviously, if you guys know about this movie, you know that this movie follows our killer. For the majority of the screen time, the camera is following our killer. And this is a silent killer. This is a Jason Voorhees type. So it's not like he's entertaining like a Pennywise or a Freddy Krueger. He's just this silent, hulking behemoth who, you know, is just killing people, on his way to trying to find his mother's necklace. So, but like I said, there are scenes in this movie where literally it feels like they're 5 minutes long of just following the killer walking through the woods. Now, the first time that we get that, when John first emerges and we get that camera following him as he's walking towards his first kill, it's cool. It's different. I dug it, but they abuse it, man. And then they start doing it with other characters. Like the camera, eventually in the third act, the camera will actually leave the killer and start following the final girl. And it's the same thing. It's just following her, walking through the woods, running. So yeah, pacing, even though this movie is a solid 94 minutes long, it's not a long watch. It's going to feel a lot longer for some people. Now, admittedly, as I was walking out of the theater, I heard a lot of the younger horror fans talking about how much they loved the movie and how they were riveted the entire time. And that's awesome. I'm glad for them. But for me, about halfway through the movie, I just started to get sick of these just strolling through the woods scenes where the killer isn't really doing anything in particular other than just walking to his next kill. You know, there is one where he's dragging a body behind him as he's walking to a ranger station. That one's acceptable. That's still early in the film when you're not quite sick of him yet. But yeah, man, the pacing in this, like, I almost feel like this movie would have been a better horror anthology segment. Like, make this like a 20 to 25 minute segment, and you could throw it in like a VHS movie or something along those lines. You know, you give us the backstory, you know, you get rid of all the fluff, you get rid of the entire final scene, which, by the way, that's the second major issue I have with this movie. So the two issues are pacing and the end of this movie. I fucking hated this final scene of the movie. The whole time I'm looking at my phone thinking, holy shit, we're getting near the end of the runtime. Is it really going to end like this? And then the credits start and it's like, are you fucking kidding me? That's how you end this movie? Like, the movie doesn't end, it just stops. You know what I mean? Like, there's no culmination of the story. There's no resolution for our final girl. There's nothing. The movie just kind of stops. And then we just kind of have to make an assumption on a few different things at the end of the movie, which obviously are kind of fall into spoilers, so I'm not going to get into them right now. So yeah, like I said, my general thoughts is this movie is a very mixed bag. It's got some pacing issues. I absolutely hate the final scene of the movie. And I don't know that it's something that I'm really going to be able to return to that often, because it's not a quote-unquote fun movie. But the kills are fun as hell. The problem is the kills are few and far between. And the other thing about the kills, too, is that after the third kill in this movie, I started to get mad because 2 of the first 3 kills are off screen. We literally do not see 2 of the first 3 kills in the movie. And after that third kill, I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this PG-13? Like, is this what they set us up for? But then after that, yes, we'll start to see the kills. And then by the third act, we're seeing the kills in all of their uncut glory. So like I said, that's probably the thing that most people are going to take away from this, is that the kills are spectacular, original, gruesome. And then the rest of the film, you know, whether they like John as a killer, whether they think his backstory is pretty weak, you know, all of those different factors are going to affect your enjoyment of the film. Overall, it's a good film, I think. It's not a great film, but I think it is a very good film. Well made. I've already talked about some of the cinematography. The score is fine. John's performance, the actor as the killer, I thought was fine. I mean, you know, not a whole lot you can really do there. But overall, I enjoyed the movie. I just don't know. I mean, this isn't a top 10 candidate for me, even though it probably has my favorite kill of the year in it right now. But I just strongly feel like this would have been better as an anthology segment. You know, just a 20 to 25 minute segment. It would have been solid. Just give me the great kills, John's backstory, and, you know, cut out that entire final scene altogether, and you've got yourself a solid 20 to 30 minute anthology segment. So yes, overall, this is just a mixed bag. There's a lot of good stuff. There's some dull stuff. Like, nothing in the movie is necessarily bad. It's just kind of dull, or, you know, been there, done that kind of thing. So overall, I enjoyed the movie. I'm not going to give the movie a high recommendation, like it's something that you need to see in theaters. This is a Shudder original, so it's very obviously going to hit Shudder probably in the next month or two. So I would say this might be a fun watch for some people at home, but when you're in a movie theater and the movie commands your attention, I found myself getting bored towards the end. So I'll leave it at that. A mixed bag that overall is more positive than negative, but yeah, definitely didn't need to be a 90-minute feature. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Where you leave, Don will pick up. So Don, what did you think of the movie?
Well, interesting that he left on the phrase mixed bag, because that's where I am. So I'm kind of indeed picking up where he left off. Although I'm on the more negative side of the matter. I do agree. My positives are generally the kills, the interactions he has. And I will say I found the initial premise intriguing enough that I mean, this is so hard. I kind of jumped into this one without really setting myself up for it. So I'm going to just backtrack just a touch here and go from the beginning. That I find the premise intriguing, but I don't think that's enough to hold the film over. And I think the kills are probably going to be the major factor to hold the film over, but I don't think that's still enough. The thing is, Venom's dead on with the pacing, and this being a perfect anthology segment idea. This is exactly what that concept is for. And trimming this thing down to 25, 30 minutes, you get an idea, you follow the killer, you get, 2 or 3 shots of him stomping around in the woods or strolling through the woods or whatever term you want to use. Come across 3 or 4 random people, butcher them mercilessly, follow one group, that you come to find out is like the main quotient, but it's like 25, 30 minutes, you don't get much of anything. And the idea of stretching that out to a feature length highlights the very nature of the film's premise being problematic. And that is, you literally are just standing around watching this guy walk through the woods for 70 minutes. Now, I don't know what the actual quotient is, but 70 minutes of watching a silent, hulking madman choose weapons out of the woods or follow people into secluded areas and then killing them. It's an intriguing idea, but it doesn't become a fun one. And the idea, why haven't we done this before? Well, this is exactly the reason why we haven't done it before. It's not an interesting idea to keep a film going for 90 minutes because the killers aren't interesting and the victims are. That's why we watch slasher movies. We follow a group of likable people who get stuck into a remote situation with a dangerous maniac who likes to use sharp weapons, and then it just becomes a matter of who's going to get impaled with a sharp object next. And there's a suspense to that. There's a fun to it, and that's what makes the genre, enjoyable. And this is the exact opposite. You just have nothing going on when we just randomly come across strangers in the middle of the woods, and maybe we get a name, maybe we don't. I mean, I couldn't tell you who any of these people are. I mean, yeah, I've only watched the film once, which doesn't help, but even still, I couldn't tell you who any of these people are. I don't remember who the final girl is. I couldn't tell you anything about that, and that's just not what I look for in a slasher movie. I look for likable people. I look for a situation that brings them together to a remote area of the world. It doesn't have to be a cabin out in the woods. It can be, practically anywhere. Although cabin in the woods does help. Let's just be honest about it. And, you see them getting dispatched one by one in creative ways. And yeah, there's, something to be said for being creative enough and trying to do something different with the formula. But I don't find this variation intriguing enough to sustain what goes on around it. And, it kind of reminds me of the same criticism I have with The Shining. Just because you're interesting to talk about doesn't make it a good movie. And that's kind of where I land with this one. It's interesting to talk about. I think the idea of following the killer and, his day-to-day lives, we kind of got a hint with that with Behind the Mask, which I thought had a much more plausible motivation for it, just because it's the, mockumentary setup and, one, the killer's interesting and, engages with the camera. So there's that. But the idea of doing it with a silent, hulking madman, it's not that interesting. And, he doesn't do much. He goes around the woods, he picks spots, to watch for victims, and then he comes across them and kills them. Like, okay, that's a fun idea at first. And then you realize, okay, we're going to be getting this for 70, 80 more minutes. And then the novelty wears off. And it just becomes tedious when you don't leave the killer's side. you want to follow the victims. And that's kind of what this one highlights, is that the killers are not the interesting people, it's the victims that are the interesting ones. And that's why we follow them for the majority of their movies. They're the ones that we latch onto. They're the ones that we want to see survive. This one here, it just becomes the final girl because the film runs out. The running time runs out. I mean, that's practically the only reason why they're any different from the other people that he stumbles across. So what makes her so special? Just because she's the last one he encounters before the running time is over? I don't find that interesting enough. So yeah, I like the kills. I love the main one, which we're gonna spoil for later on, so I'm not gonna mention that. But it's just not enough for me. Like like we've been saying, the idea is intriguing enough and it's creative enough, but there's just not enough there surrounding it to keep me interested for 90 minutes. This is indeed very much one of those. It should have been tested out as a short or tested out as an anthology segment first and see how that goes. And I would have preferred this to, have been an anthology segment. This could have been very easily 20, 30 minutes, trim a lot of the negative downtime down, get to the good parts, and then, boom, that's your short. So it's such a hard one to recommend. I mean, Venom's completely on with this one. Like, for me, I don't find the creativity and the originality, unique enough to recommend it. But then everything else about it kind of works. So, like, where do you stand with it? Like, yeah, it's such a tough one. I could say give it a shot just to form your own opinion. But if all you're looking for is just, the traditional tried and true slasher formula, I don't know if you're going to like it. And that's the thing, is that I don't know how many are going to like it compared to giving it a shot. So, yeah, it's one of those. I don't know where to stand with it. I guess, wait for streaming. I can't imagine this thing is going to, play even better when you have the option to fast forward it and, trim the downtime off. But yeah, I don't see this being a theatrical release. This is very much one of those, give it a shot at your own time, your own leisure. So yeah, skip the theaters. It's going to be on streaming by the end of next month anyway. Who knows when, but yeah, wait for Shudder, I guess, is probably the main thing. But I genuinely don't know where I'm going to stand with this one. So back to you, Mike.
Just to chime in here, according to Shudder.com, In a Violent Nature drops on July 4th on the service. So literally, you only have to wait a month.
Okay. Independence from the theater with dropping on the show on July 4th. Yeah, so I agree pretty much with everything that's been said so far. A mixed bag. For better or worse, I know coming off the festival buzz, like the big thing that was being said was POV gimmick of staying on the killer the whole time. The movie doesn't necessarily do that the entire time. So once it breaks away at several parts in the movie, then you start to question, like, well, why was that even like the choice to begin with, since you didn't stick to it? Now I'll say, like, the kind of an initial, I think Venom was bringing up like the long walking sequences with the initial one, when we kind of see the killer's emergence and like introduction to him. I was okay with that one because I could understand, like, okay, this is kind of showing like the killer emerging and showing up and kind of getting to where he needs to be in order for kills to happen. So I'm like, okay, I understand. But then, like, when they go back to it throughout, I don't understand why you're doing it now, because you've already broken away from that perspective anyway. So I didn't see the useful, like, going back to it at various times. The kills themselves, the ones we get on, Venom is right. There's I think it's either one or two at the beginning where they on screen, so I got a little worried. Yeah. Like, okay, were people over exaggerating the kills? But then once we start getting them on screen, I'm like, okay, yeah, here we go. Like these are legitimately, and the sound design between them is good. And that's another thing to point out. The music has no score or soundtrack to it, so uh, it there are parts when they're walking through the woods, like it is kind of cool because you're getting just the ambient noises of the woods.
Mhm.
That is good, specific moments and like in small doses, but like even like just hearing the cracking of like twigs and leaves, eventually that even kind of, okay, we got it. Like we understand. Like all of us have probably been in some areas before. We understand the noises of walking on leaves. Like we all get it. What else? I like the killer himself. I think, story, it's not like multi-layered, in depth, but I think we get enough. I the While I do find the backstory perfectly like fine, the the kind of flimsy nature of the of how they're kind of keeping him, I guess resting.
Oh, that's a
It's
giant plot
it's like,
hole. I'm gonna
well,
be
I'm just
breaking
like
that
that.
down because it bothers me.
Yeah, the fact that you think like that, like even if it technically works, like is there just potential for that area just to get disturbed on accident, like with no one intending to do, like people, well, not even idiots, just people kind of out in the woods exploring, like people aren't going to come across that and like with no bad intention, just all I won't totally spoil how they keep them there, but like I'll just quote unquote say the area with no bad intention because I could see that happening easily. So I found that kind of interesting, or it maybe kind of questionable. Um, but I did like the design of the killer, the mask he ends up using. I thought that was all kind of cool. In fact, I mean, if you put this killer in like a different movie, I think you could do a lot with this actual killer. As recommending this, I'm kind of the mindset of, if you are able to see it in the theater, just do it, because we've kind of really had a resurgence of like theaters giving like these smaller movies a chance, and people continue to buy tickets for them. Like, look, and it's just a fact that like the probability is every one of these that you go see is going to be a home run. But if you're willing to give these a chance, and like the returns on uh, the money or the revenue for them that they're creating, we're going to get more. And sometimes, yeah, you're going to get a mixed bag of one. It's not going to be as like over the top praise like a Terrifier 2, right? But if you go to see these at least, so I would say if you have the time and the money to go see it, just go see it. And in this one, I've heard reaction all across the board on this. People that hate it, there's people that love it, and then there's people like us that are kind of somewhere in between, that we like certain aspects of it, but wouldn't consider it like a home run of a movie. The end, I did read an interview with the director because I was kind of interested to understand like why he even approached it this way, but just to see what he was thinking. And his explanation of the movie, it kind of makes sense. It doesn't mean that it makes the end of the movie, but now I know at least what he was going for with it. But I'll leave that for spoilers because it's too much about how the movie ends. I don't want to do that. But overall, yeah, I would say mixed bag. Probably not a top 10. I don't know. Maybe right now, I'm trying to think. Like, would it be like a fringe? Only because the lack of like good movies I've seen so far. Maybe, but I don't
As
expect
of
it to be like top 10
as of
by
right
the
now,
end of
it's
it.
as of right now, it's literally my number 10. So I'm expecting this one to fall off really easily.
Yeah, as of right now, it's not in my top 10 at all. It's barely top 20. I've seen a lot of movies.
Saying my list is only. I'm saying my list is only fresh cut. So like I'm saying, for right now,
Yep.
yeah, my list for me right now, my list, it's number 10, and it's gonna fall off in the next week or two.
Probably, yep. Same with Don. Like I can't even what I don't really keep an active ranking throughout the year, but just like thinking in my as fast as I can about everything I've seen so far, it could be like 10, but I fall off. Is there anything else I need to say that hasn't been already? I'm not sure. Yeah, as far as like, other than the killer, like pretty much all the characters are just kind of your standard teenage or young 20 somethings in a movie that are camping. I mean, none of them really stand out. That's probably by this movie. The across the board here is the kills, and maybe the killer themselves, like the design around the killer, but it's going to be the practical effects used on the kills. I do think that is like the standout aspect of the movie. If there's anything to like hang the hat on, like, yes, this is why it's worth seeing, kind of creativity in some of the kills that happen. And what else? That's about it for general thoughts, only because I'd just be repeating what you guys have already said. So I'll kick it back to you, Venom.
One thing I forgot to mention during my general thoughts is that I genuinely hate everybody in this movie. Now, I'm not sure if this was a purposeful choice by the director to make everyone in this movie shitty, almost like to make John the protagonist of the film. And even though the movie follows John, it's really hard to call him the protagonist. He's very obviously the antagonist, but it's just, I don't know, man. Just filling this movie with a bunch of shitty people that nobody really likes. I mean, I think our final girl and the stoner are probably the only people that are even mildly likable in this movie. But even they kind of have their issues too. Like they're kind of shitty friends, and our final girl's kind of a shitty girlfriend. But like I said, I'll get into that in the walkthrough. So yeah, like I said, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You don't need to fill your horror movie with unlikable people just so that we can get guilty pleasure kills. Okay. Especially for us older horror fans, we don't need the guilty pleasure kill anymore, especially a movie full of them. You know, if you want to give us one shitty character that turns into the guilty pleasure kill of the movie, that's fine. But when everybody in the movie is a piece of shit, it takes away that whole, like, you know, enjoying watching them getting killed, unless they're in very original and brutal ways, which this movie does sometimes pull off. So, but yeah, I've said it again. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Directors, you know, make your characters more likable. It makes the stakes so much better and higher. When there's characters on the screen that I don't want to die, it makes their deaths impactful. It means something. You fill a movie with a bunch of dipshit, you know, good-looking white kids, I don't give a fuck. I just don't give a fuck about any of them, especially when they're all assholes. So, yeah, another minor gripe, but I think that's kind of common with most slashers. Most slashers are going to have unlikable characters in them, you know, where they're basically being set up as the guilty pleasure kill. But like I said, when it's a movie full of them, it doesn't always work for me. What else can we talk about? We talked about John. We talked about, we didn't talk about his backstory. Obviously, we'll talk about that in the walkthrough, which, like I've already said, I think we all kind of agree it's fairly thin. It's not necessarily a bad backstory. It's just kind of thin. It's like they just thought of it in like 5 minutes, just threw it together, and they're like, all right, that's good enough. And they were right. It is good enough. So I'll take it. But yeah, ultimately, man, I just don't understand the motivation of this director. And Chris Nash directed and wrote this movie. Well, wrote the movie. There's not a whole lot of writing or dialogue in the movie to write, but whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, his decision to just follow this character doing nothing for so much of the film, just, I don't know if he thought he was building tension or atmosphere or what, but it's like the atmosphere was already built. We're in the woods. There's a crazy killer going around killing people. Cool. The atmosphere is set. The tension is going to come from the stalking scenes, but that's the thing. When the camera is following John, they're not all stalking scenes. Like, at least half of them are just him walking. Like, when he first emerges, you know, we see him find some animals in some bear traps in the woods that supposedly shouldn't be there. Oh, and then the reason, too, that John is able to do what he does is because he is in a state park. He's in a protected, or not in a state, national. He's in a fucking national park. So he's protected in there. Obviously, it's not like the police can't go in there and get him. But for the most part, you know, it's just park rangers. And if they find a dead body, well, you know, we'll be lucky if they care at all enough to call in a sheriff or whatever. So, like I said, as we've all already said, the movie has some good stuff going for it. It has some bad stuff going for it. Let's go ahead and just jump into the walkthrough and let you decide. Now, this is going to be your final spoiler warning. If you've already seen In a Violent Nature or have no interest in seeing it, then go ahead and join us for our walkthrough. If you have not seen it yet and are actually interested in it, and maybe you're waiting for the Shudder release, then yeah, I'd say go ahead and stop the show now. And if you want to return in July after you watch it to find out more details on what we thought about individual scenes, you're welcome to. Otherwise, if you don't care about the film, go ahead and stick around. I will try to do as much justice as I can for these kills, because a couple of these kills really need to be seen. You know, my description is not going to do justice for them. But here we go, folks. Okay. Our movie opens up with just a group of kids walking through the woods, basically. They're just walking through the woods. Now, the camera is static. The camera is just sitting in one position, so we don't actually see the kids. We hear their voices. We hear that they walk by this, like, pipe that's sticking out of the ground, and on the pipe is a gold necklace just sitting there randomly. Now, the kids, you know, they all look at it, and one of them is like, "Oh, is that real gold? That might be worth something." And you hear another kid's voice basically say, "You know, that's probably there for a reason, so maybe it's better that we not touch it." And then they all decide, okay, fuck it, we're not going to touch it. So they all walk away, and then that's when we actually see the camera pan over to the pipe. Like I said, this whole time the camera's just been static on one shot. When it pans over to the pipe where the necklace is hanging, we actually see the last kid that's walking away. His name was Colt. He's the massive douchebag of the group. I mean, like I said, I have issues with everybody in this movie, but Colt is definitely meant to be the massive douchebag, especially because he is the one who takes the necklace. So after they walk away with the necklace, we get another top-down camera angle where the camera's on top, pointing directly straight down to the ground where the pipe is. And this is where we see that it's a pipe. So it almost looks like somebody buried themselves purposely and then used the pipe to still get air. Later on, we'll find out that wasn't the case, and I have problems with why that wasn't the case, but we'll get into that later. So we start to see the pipe wiggle. You know, we start to see wiggling, jiggling, and then finally the pipe shoots out of the ground, like something pushes the pipe out of the ground. Then we see the moss and the grass on the ground start to, like, shake a little bit, start to move, and then we see a hand pop out. After the hand pops out, we see a person basically digging their way out of the ground. Almost like if anybody's ever read like one of the Anne Rice vampire books, like Interview with the Vampire or Vampire Lestat, that's common in vampire lore, where they'll literally give themselves to the ground for like 100 or 200 years. They'll literally just bury themselves. And then when they're like hungry or whatever, they'll emerge and the world has changed. That's basically the story of the Vampire Lestat. I digress though. So after we see this guy, you know, and we don't know his name at this point. We know nothing about him. It's just, you know, out of context guy digging himself out of the ground. After we see him digging out of the ground, from that point, for the majority of the rest of the film, we'll see him from behind. And I'm sure if you've seen the trailer, you know what I'm talking about. The camera is basically following John throughout the movie. So he starts walking around the woods. He sees some bear traps with dead animals in them, like deers and whatnot, dead for a very long time. These things are like beyond rotted. They're basically mummies. They're mummified at this point. And he finds a few of them, a few bear traps with dead animals in them. So finally, he's just walking, obviously looking for that necklace that was taken from him. We'll find out later where the necklace comes from, but blah, blah, blah. And he basically is just walking through the woods, and he ends up coming across a house. And just outside of that house, there is a park ranger arguing with the owner of the house. And the park ranger is accusing this old guy of setting traps in national park areas. Basically, the guy's house, the old guy's house, is just outside of the park boundaries. So anything he does on his own property obviously is legal. But this guy's setting up bear traps in the woods in the national park just behind his house. But what's weird is that he's just leaving the animals there to die and rot. It's not like he's illegally hunting. It's almost like he's doing it just for trespassers. Like he just doesn't want any human or animal trespassers near his house. So he's got these bear traps set up. So anyway, we hear the park ranger and the old man arguing. Finally, the park ranger says, listen, if I find another trap out there and I find out it's yours, I'm coming back here with the sheriff. And the old guy has no respect for this park ranger. He's just like, fuck you. You have no jurisdiction here. Get the fuck out of here. My house isn't in the national park, blah, blah, blah. They end up just kind of, fucking each other off, just saying, fuck you. And the park ranger goes on his way. We see John approaching, and I say John, even though we haven't explained that John is the killer. Yes, John is the killer. We talked about that in the non-spoiler section. We follow John as he walks into the old guy's house. Now, this killer, it's kind of funny to watch the movie from the killer's point of view because it shows how lucky killers sometimes are. Like literally, as John is walking into the old guy's house, the old guy is walking out a back door on the opposite side of the house. And then finally, John is basically in the guy's house looking for that necklace. He ends up finding a necklace with a locket on it that looks very much like the one that was taken from him. And he goes to reach for it to verify that it's his necklace. And we hear a single gunshot ring out. And it's the old guy. The old guy came back in the house. Apparently, he came back in the house quiet enough that John didn't even notice, because literally the guy takes a shot at him, misses completely. But it's one of those bolt action rifles where you have to like load it for each shot. So while the old guy is trying to reload the gun, he looks up and realizes it's not the park ranger that's in his house, which is what he thought. He thought the park ranger came back and just walked into his house, which is why he just took a blind shot. When he finally looks up as he's reloading the rifle, he realizes that it's not the park ranger, that it's a fucking hulking mongoloid of a human, and basically runs away. And we see John follow him, and John, like I said, is basically Jason Voorhees. This is basically the reincarnation of Jason Voorhees. This guy doesn't run. John never ever runs. He walks everywhere. Should I say he stalks? I think stalks would be the better word. But yeah, he never ever runs. He never picks up the pace. Very, Friday the 13th. So, as I said, after John chases the old guy finally, in an amazing sign of karma, the old guy steps into one of his own traps that he set out there, and now he is shackled to a goddamn tree attached to this bear trap, and John is just kind of slowly, I can imagine the look on John's face where he's probably smiling as he's approaching the old guy as he looks at him trapped in one of his own bear traps, but obviously we don't see John's face at this point. And then all we see is John reach out one of his hands towards the old guy's face, and then the scene cuts, and after that, we're back at the old guy's house, and then we see the same hand that John extended towards the old guy, but now it's bloody. Now there's blood dripping off that same hand that we saw earlier that didn't have blood on it. So we see the bloody hand reach for the necklace. John looks at it and realizes it's not his because the inscription on it is "Number 1 motherfucker," which is the same inscription on the guy's trucker hat, the old guy's trucker hat that he was wearing. So yeah, this guy was an absolute delight, I'm sure. So there's your first kill. Happens completely off screen. We don't even get to see the after effects, like what he actually did to the guy, which kind of sucks. So that's pretty much the end of that. Then finally, we meet the group of kids that we heard in the cold open. We see that there's, 5 or 6 of them? I think there's 6 of them total. I can't remember. These characters are so forgettable and so unlikable that I don't even remember how many of them there were. But there was definitely our final girl, Chris, who seems like she might be, a mulatto girl, part black. She has darker skin, but, doesn't look full on African American. Her shitty boyfriend, Colt. We get the stoner Chuck, who's barely in the film. And then we get a couple other characters whose names, I think one of them is named Evan and another one's named Brody or something. I don't know. Like I said, they're forgettable characters. So we see the characters. They've rented a cabin for the weekend. They're out there just kind of chilling, hanging out. And we start talking about the slaughter, the famous slaughter that happened in this town. Chuck the stoner basically starts telling the story of John, and this is where we get the backstory. And what we find out is that John was a member of this community as a child when this place was a mining town, when the only people that lived in this town were miners and their families. John's father was like the foreman of the miners. He was like one of the bosses there, you know. Foreman, I guess, is probably the proper term. But John is, sadly, John is mentally challenged. So John's a little kid. We never get the exact age of when all this happens, but we, figured John's a little kid. Like I said, he's mentally challenged. He loves toys. Every time he finds a toy, he stops whatever he's doing and just starts playing with it. So he very much has a childish one-track mind. Anyway, one day, one of the miners, not his father, one of the regular miners, slips on one of John's toys and breaks his leg, and he misses work for, however long it takes to heal the broken leg. He obviously is pissed off about it. John's father, defends John, basically saying, hey, he's just a kid and he's mentally challenged. You should have been watching where you were walking, blah, 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 blah. And obviously, John shouldn't be playing near the miners either, anywhere near the mines. But since his father is the foreman, I guess he kind of has carte blanche. So we find out that the miners want to get revenge on John. But, they don't want to kill him or anything. They just want to scare him. So what they do is they secretly give John a note, basically telling him that there's a bunch of toys up at the fire tower. In the near the mines, and to meet them there later that night. So the story is John sneaks out, goes and climbs up the fire tower. Unfortunately, he does not find a bag of toys. What he finds is one of the miners wearing a miner's mask, kind of similar to Harry Warden's mask in My Bloody Valentine, but without the gas mask part in the front. And definitely a lot more old-timey looking, like more 1700s, 1800s miner helmet, as opposed to Harry Warden's, which is a little bit more modern, more like 70s and 80s. So the miner wearing the mask scares John, and John, unfortunately, is so scared he falls out of the tower. The story is that as soon as he lands, he breaks his neck on impact, and John is dead. The miners are all freaked out. They don't know what to do. They're contemplating hiding the body, just not saying anything. So eventually what they decide to do is the miner that was wearing the mask that scared him removed his mask and put it on John. So that it basically, they tried to make it look like John was playing and that he climbed the fire tower with the mask on and then maybe either slipped or just, had an accident of some kind and fell off on his own. Now, John's father knew that was not the truth. John's father knew that the fucking miners had something to do with his son's death because they openly hated him. It was no secret how much they hated John. So one day at the mess hall, John's father starts shit with the miners and, he's like basically accusing them of killing his son. They, of course, take offense and then they beat the shit out of him, which basically kills him. So they kill their own foreman because the foreman accuses them of something that they actually did do. So yeah, there's some great, great human beings there. So at this point, John and John's father are now dead, and everybody thinks life is just going to go on as normal, but no. I forget how long after John's father's death, but not long after. It might be like a couple of weeks, maybe 10 days. I can't remember exactly. There's a slaughter at the mining camp, and basically the owner of the mining camp, the guy who probably would never be at the mines, basically decides to visit the mines one day and, the town and the area. But when he gets there, everyone is dead. Literally, miners are dead. Miners' families are dead. Just like everyone. And they're not just dead. They were like cut into pieces. They're like ripped apart, entrails everywhere. So they actually, the police chalk it up as an animal attack. I think the official word that they tell the public is that there was a meat contamination at the mining camp, and that they all ate the meat and died, and then animals came out of the woods and tore the bodies apart to eat them. So that's what they told the public. But they never did find out who actually committed the slaughter. So there you go. That's our backstory. So John is basically a vengeful specter, I guess would be a better way to put it. Not a vengeful spirit necessarily, because spirits usually can't interact with people, but specters are corporeal. They can actually interact with human living things. Kind of like Scorpion from the Mortal Kombat games. Bad example, I know, but it's the same thing. Scorpion is a specter. He's not a spirit. So anyway, point is, we've got our backstory. So at this point, the kids, the rest of the kids are all making fun of Chuck because they think that Chuck made up the story and that it's not real, blah, 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 blah. And they all go on their separate ways. They all go to bed. Chuck decides to, and Chuck, like I said, is the stoner of the group. So he decides to pack a bowl and go smoke a bowl out in the woods. Now, this whole time, Chuck has an interaction with a couple of the other kids at the on the porch, on the patio of the cabin, where they're making fun of him because they think he's about to go back to the gas station to hang out with these girls that apparently invited him to hang out earlier in the day. So they're making fun of him, but Chuck really isn't going to hang out with those girls. I feel bad for Chuck. He's such an early kill in the movie, but he's one of the only likable people in this whole movie. And, him being a stoner helps definitely. So, we'll leave that alone. Anyway, point is, Chuck ends up going out in the woods to smoke a bowl. And of course, this whole time, like I said, I don't need to say it anymore at this point. This whole time, the camera is following John, our killer, and he's watching. He's like eavesdropping on the backstory, at the campfire and everything. So that's why the camera's there. That's kind of how they explain it to us. Anyway, John ends up finding a hacksaw like in like a shed near the cabin. He grabs the hacksaw, he follows Chuck out to where Chuck is smoking a bowl, and he basically does a half decap. You know what I mean? Like basically Chuck is standing against the tree smoking a bowl. John comes up from behind them, takes the sharp edge of the hacksaw and basically puts it in his mouth and starts pulling towards the tree. And of course, we get the inevitable half decap where, half of his head from the mouth up has been decapitated off his body, which I love those. I love half decaps. I always fucking love those kind of kills. I remember Wrong Turn, the original Wrong Turn, had one of my favorite half decap kills ever. So at this point, Chuck is gone. And the thing about this movie that also bothers me is that since we don't follow the kids, we don't get to see, like, when they find out that someone's missing, like, we don't get to see their concern with, hey, Chuck never came back last night. So, like I said, since we're following the killer, we're missing out on a lot of the story with these kids, which, again, was the intention of the director. But like I said, it just makes for some very dull scenes where we're just watching John staring at the kids from the tree line at the woods or whatever. So, all right. So anyway, it's the next morning. Chuck is gone. And two of the girls in the group, two lesbian girls in the group, go off to, quote unquote, do some yoga. But they go to the lake's edge, and there's a pier at the lake. They go to the lake's edge to do some yoga. But one of the girls decides, fuck it, I want to swim. I don't want to do yoga. So she starts taking her off her clothes and she jumps in the lake. This whole time, John is across the lake at the opposite edge, just standing there staring at them. It's funny too, because a lot of the scenes in this movie, it seems like the kids should be able to see John from where he's standing, because these scenes mostly take place in broad daylight. Most of the kills in this movie are in broad daylight. Our third act is mostly at night. But yeah, the first two acts is almost completely daytime. Even though Chuck, our second kill, did get taken out at night. So anyway, the other girl, the one that doesn't want to swim, is a little upset. And she's like, fuck it. I'm going to go up to the tower. They still call it the fire tower, even though the physical fire tower isn't there anymore. Now it's just like a cliff. not even a cliff, but like a very steep hill that kind of looks over, the panorama of the forest. So, but they still call it the fire tower. Anyway, she ends up telling the girl, well, if you want to have some fun, come, after you're done with your swim, come join me over at the tower, and, we'll have some dirty fun. I forget her exact line, but it was very sexual. And then we see John basically walk into the lake. Very Jason Voorhees-like once again. Like I said, 90% of what John does in this movie is very Jason Voorhees-like. So we see him calmly walk into the lake. Oh, shit, I skipped the scene. I'm very sorry. I can't skip that scene. It's important. After John kills Chuck the Stoner, he drags his body to the ranger station, basically throws John's head through the glass door to break in. And then in the ranger station, this is where John gets his mask and his weapons. In the ranger station, there's a museum to the miners, that used to work in this area and the mines. And in one of the displays is a mask, is a miner's mask, one of the old timey all leather miner's masks. So John sees it and literally picks up Chuck's decapitated body and throws it into the display to break the glass. It's like John doesn't know how to use simple tools. He's got to use dead bodies to do everything. So he breaks the display open. He grabs a mask. He grabs a hatchet. And then he grabs these things called drag hooks. And the drag hooks, it's basically a metal chain that's about, 6 or so feet long, and on each end of the chain is a large metal hook. Those chains were used to drag the carts of whatever they were mining for. Let's say they were coal miners. They would use those hooks to drag the carts out of the mines. The carts would be on tracks, like train tracks. They would hook up each one to one handle on each side of the thing and then drag it out. Hence why they're called drag hooks. So now John has his mask and his weapons. So sorry about that, folks. I can't skip that scene. That's an important one. So back to the lake. John, again, walks into the lake and doesn't swim, mind you. He actually walks along the bottom of the lake. Again, we don't see it. The camera kind of just sits static across the lake from where the girl is swimming. So she's swimming the whole time. It's just a static shot of her swimming. We're waiting for something to happen. Finally, the camera angle changes to the other side of the lake where the girl is swimming. And we don't actually see John. We see her scream and then get pulled down under the water. Then she comes back up really quick, kind of like the first kill in Jaws. She comes up really fast to catch her breath and then gets pulled down again. We see the bubbles in the water, and then we see the bubbles stop. And then maybe, it felt like 5 minutes, but it was probably only like 30 seconds to a minute of that static shot. Finally, the girl's body comes and floats up to the water, and we see that she is now dead. She has been dispatched. So that's the third kill in the movie, and 2 of them were off screen. So that's why Mike and I were both really worried at this point. Like, what the fuck? I thought this was a rated R movie. So, and then we see John walk out of the lake again with the mask on. What's kind of funny is that in the theater, I thought to myself, that's a leather mask. How the fuck can John breathe in that thing underwater? Not even thinking about the fact that he's walking along the bottom of the lake. He doesn't need to fucking breathe, idiot. I felt stupid for half a second, but I corrected myself. Anyway, so at this point, John decides, and what's great about this too is that since we're watching this movie from the killer's perspective, we can actually hear the kids talking. And later in the film, it's actually going to work against them because we're going to actually hear them talking about a plan to trap John. But John is literally standing right there listening. So it's kind of funny how, we're actually seeing how some of the protagonist actions work against them in horror movies, since this is an angle that we've never seen before. Because I always watch horror movies where someone is whispering, even though the killer is like one room away or even in the same room, but they'll be whispering to their friend. And instantly I'm like, can the killer not hear them? Well, in this movie, we get the confirmation that, yes, the killer can hear him, and he knows what the fuck you're saying. But like I said, so in this scene, he heard the girl say, "I'll meet you at the fire tower." So as soon as he kills the swimmer girl, he walks over to the fire tower. She's on the cliff there doing her yoga. She hears... that's another thing about this movie that bothers me, is that John's footsteps are very loud, but it seems like the protagonists in this movie don't notice him until he's right on top of them. And it's kind of, and again, because we're getting the angle of the killer's perspective, it's kind of interesting to see how unobservant people in horror movies really are. Obviously, we've known that for fucking decades, but to see it from the other angle is pretty entertaining, kind of funny. So, John walks up to the girl doing yoga. She turns around and realizes that it's not her friend, that it's this big hulking guy who's now wearing a miner's mask and has fucking drag hooks in his hands. So she tries to run away from him, but she's on a cliff. Literally, her only escape would be to jump down the very steep hill in front of her. She turns around to face the opposite way of John, like to face the cliff. It looks like she's about to make the decision to jump, but John catches up to her. And folks, this is the kill. This is my fucking kill of the year. For those of you who haven't seen the movie and stuck with us for the walkthrough, I'm going to try to do this kill justice, but I don't think I can. So the girl turns around facing away from John. John impales her completely with the drag hook, literally jams it completely right around like the small of her back, like in her lower back, jams it all the way through so that it comes out her belly. She realizes that she's been impaled, and she looks down and sees the entire drag hook sticking out from her stomach. At this point, I think John is just going to kick her off the fucking cliff and just kind of hang her body there from the drag hook. But no, John is way more original than that. He takes the girl, he turns her around so that she's now facing him. He takes the drag hook that's sticking out of her belly, pulls it more, so he's pulling it more through, and then impales it on her fucking on the top of her head. So literally this drag hook is through the girl, and then the end of it is buried into her head. Now at this point, John turns her around so that she's not facing him, and he starts to pull on the chain from her back. And we see her head start to get pulled forward. We actually see her neck snap. We actually see the bone inside break. And then John continues fucking pulling until he literally pulls her head out through her fucking torso. It is such a glorious kill. I literally, when the head popped out of the body in the opposite direction, that's when I literally let out an audible, holy shit. And I saw the Mexican kid throw me a sneer at that moment. I think I pissed him off, but I don't care. That kill came out of nowhere. It is original. And yes, it does, towards the end of it, it does kind of look hokey. It does kind of look like a puppet. But they did the best they could, and I fucking appreciate it. I love that kill. My favorite kill of the year thus far. Less than halfway through the year, so obviously that could change. But goddamn, that kill was amazing. It's all almost as good as the skull fuck and the sadness. Almost. Anyway, after killing this girl, finally the kids find out that people are missing. Like Chuck hasn't come back, and that the other two girls haven't come back. So Chris and one of the other guys, her ex-boyfriend, not Colt, her current douchebag boyfriend. As it turns out, one of the other guys, I think his name is Troy, is an ex-boyfriend of hers. They invited him on the camping trip because he's been depressed lately. Colt hates him because he's so depressed, because he's a downer. He's like, he keeps bringing down the mood. What the fuck? Why did you invite him? Blah, blah, blah. So obviously ex-boyfriend and current boyfriend don't like each other. So Chris and Troy, ex-boyfriend, they decide to take an ATV to the ranger station to see if they can find a ranger, because 3 of their friends are missing at this point. Colt and Evan, I think, one of the other guys, they stay back at the cabin in case their friends decide to come back. And once Chris and her ex-boyfriend leave on the ATV, we see John come out of the woods and start walking towards the truck that they all came out there in. They all came out there in like an SUV. He takes a like a 2x4, like a piece of wood that he finds on the ground. Luckily, they left the windows open in the truck. I don't know why the hell you would leave your windows open all night in the woods. It's like you're inviting wild animals to move into your car. But for whatever it's worth, the windows are open. The driver's side window is open. John takes the 2x4 that he just grabbed and he wedges it against the driver's seat and the horn of the truck. So the horn is blaring just straight, While the horn is blaring, we see John then walk around to the back of the cabin on the right side, taking his sweet ass time. Like the whole time we're thinking, where are the two guys? Are they going to come out and, don't they wonder why their horn is suddenly going off for no reason? As John hits the right side of the cabin, that's when we hear Colt come out of the cabin and start walking towards the truck, basically going, what the fuck, what's going on? Then John walks all the way around the cabin. He walks around the back and then walks back up the left side of the cabin to go back to the front. Now, what John doesn't notice is that when he walks by the left side of the cabin, the other guy that's there with Colt is standing right at the fucking window, looking at John, literally looks right at John as John walks by to go get Colt, who's now outside at the truck. Which, kind of interesting that the killer missed something. But yeah, literally walks right by the window, doesn't notice that the other guy sees him, and then he goes out to try to kill Colt. He buries his hatchet into Colt's thigh, splitting his thigh open pretty badly. But then the other guy comes out of the house and with a rifle and shoots John a couple of times. First, he shoots him in the shoulder, which of course doesn't stop him. But then he shoots him right in the heart. Like a direct heart shot. So obviously they think that John is dead. This is a horror movie, so we all know what's up. So the other guy, Troy, tries to put a tourniquet on Colt's leg, right above where his thigh got split open by the hatchet. While he's doing this, the camera shows John passed out on the ground in the foreground, and then in the background we see the two guys dealing with Colt's injury. At this point, he gets the tourniquet on and he's able to get Colt back up on his feet, and then they start walking not towards their truck, which you would think would be the obvious choice. No, they start walking towards the woods to try to get to the ranger station that their other two friends already took an ATV to. Then, so the camera stays there. They get up and they get out of the camera shot, and we hear them walking away, but the shot is still on John. And right after they walk away, John starts breathing. We see his chest start heaving up and down. We've seen it before in multiple Friday the 13th movies, so we know what's coming. John eventually gets up, grabs his hatchet, and throws it towards the guys. Mind you, the camera is on John the whole time. So he throws the hatchet. Off screen, we hear the hatchet hit something, and we hear Colt start going, "Oh, what the fuck, man?" And this is the overhead shot that I was talking about that I fucking love. At this point, the camera shifts to an overhead shot directly pointing down, and we see John slowly start lumbering towards Colt, who obviously his thigh is split open, so he isn't going anywhere. We're not sure what happened to the other guy at this point because it happened off screen. But then eventually he gets to Colt, and we see Troy on the path with the fucking hatchet buried in the back of his head. So John is an amazing woodsman. Man, he's got some incredible aim. And the camera, and this whole scene is one shot, by the way. There's no cuts. There's a few scenes like that in this movie. Not just the walking scenes, which are very obvious, long single shots, but even some of the kills. Another one of the really good kills coming up is a single long shot, but we'll get into that. So this one, like I said, it's a single long shot. We see Troy dead on the path with the hatchet in his head. We see Colt on the ground trying to get away, but obviously his thigh is injured, so he can't get up. And what we see is John pick up a giant fucking boulder. Well, maybe not giant. Giant to me or you, but maybe to John's mongoloid ass, not ultra giant, because he picks it up fairly easily. And then we see him stand above Colt's body. He lifts the boulder up, throws it down on his head, and fucking Colt's head just explodes into just brain tissue and blood and skull and hair. Oh God, it was fucking awesome. Very obviously, well, I don't want to say very obviously CGI. That could have been practical if they did the cut. If they did the cut as well as they do in one of the kills that's coming up. So maybe it is practical. I don't know, but it looks fucking awesome regardless. And of course, it's Colt, who is the douchebag who originally took the necklace from John's burial site. So, I would have liked to have seen him take a little bit more damage, torture, not insta-kill, because ultimately that kill probably, I can't imagine Colt felt any pain. His head literally exploded instantly. All right, so at this point, we're down to our last two, or actually three survivors, because what we find is John, like I said, John listens to the conversations that these kids are having, so he knows that Chris and her ex are on their way to the ranger station, which, by the way, still has Chuck's body and decapitated head in there. What we hear is, or what we see is, we see John start to approach the ranger cabin, and outside the ranger cabin is Chris, her ex-boyfriend, and then the park ranger that we saw in the early scene with the old man, the one who was accusing him of using bear traps. And he starts to tell more stories, more backstories about what happened. Now, apparently, this park ranger wasn't around when the original crime occurred, so all he knows is what his father told him, and apparently his father never informed him that John was an innocent kid who got killed by a practical joke. So this park ranger thinks that John is just a malevolent, evil thing that just keeps rising, and then he starts to tell the backstory of how 10 years ago his father had an interaction with John, and that he was able to kill John, well, quote unquote, kill John and bury him in the ground. Unfortunately, that only held for 3 years, because 3 years later, again, John comes out, but this time he gets revenge on the park ranger's father, and he kills the park ranger's father. Mind you, this is all being relayed to us in a story. It's not like we're seeing flashback scenes. So the ranger then says that after John killed my father, I put John back in the ground. Now, this is the part that really fucking bothers me. Why are these people burying John and then giving him a pipe so that he can breathe? Like, wouldn't it be better to just put like a boulder there and put the necklace on the boulder or whatever? Oh shit, I skipped the necklace. By the way, folks, the necklace belongs to John's mother. It was given to him by his father after John's mother died. So that's the quick backstory on the necklace. So like I said, we're still searching for the necklace. At this point, Chris is wearing the necklace because Colt took it and then gave it to Chris as a gift. Again, we don't see that scene. Just out of nowhere, suddenly Chris is wearing the necklace. Or John notices that she's wearing the necklace. So now John is after her. So anyway, back to the park ranger. The park ranger obviously, has had a history with John, and his father, like his family has a history with John. So he's basically there to make sure that John doesn't, go do exactly what John is doing. John starts to approach them while literally broad daylight in front of the park ranger station. John just comes out of the woods and starts walking towards them, and then stops when he sees that the park ranger has a shotgun. And the park rangers talks to him. Like, I don't think he actually says like, "Hi, John," but I think he says something along the lines of, "I'm going to put you back in the ground where you belong." Why don't they just burn this fucking guy's body? I don't know. There's so many plot holes in this. Like, why are we reburying a supernatural killer that keeps coming back and killing people again? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Burn the body, dismember him, pull a Michael Myers at the end of Halloween Ends. I mean, whatever you got to do to decimate that body. But yeah,
at least try, because there are a few points in the movie where they get the upper hand on him, and it's like, well, why'd you stop there?
Yeah, at one point, Chris and her ex-boyfriend actually have a tank of gas, like a little portable tank of gas, and it looks like they're gonna try to take John out, but they never get the chance. And why do they never get the chance? Because basically, oh wait, I skipped a bit. So basically, the park ranger shoots John in the chest, and John goes down. And he's not breathing. We see that his chest isn't heaving up and down. And Chris asks, is he dead? And the ranger knows. The ranger's like, nope, he is not dead. Bullets cannot stop him. They only slow him down. But the ranger still has the gun pointed at John. He is not moving that gun. So if John even twitches, he's going to shoot him again. Eventually, the ranger tells Chris's ex-boyfriend to go get some chains out of the shed, and that they're going to tie him up. They're going to chain him up, and that they're going to make sure once and for all that he doesn't come back out of the ground. Unfortunately, the ex-boyfriend, he's a little bit of an effeminate idiot. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the toughest guy around, which kind of probably shows why him and Chris didn't work out. And then Chris runs into the arms of, fuckboy douchebag cult. But anyway, so the ex-boyfriend basically says, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't get near him. My hands are shaking. I'm not going to go anywhere near that guy. So the ranger says, okay, put the chains on the ground near his feet. I'll do it myself. And the ranger is actually pretty smart. Rather than just handing the gun over to the guy, he actually says, okay, we're going to count it down. I'm going to count to 3. And on 3, I'm going to hand the shotgun over to you very quickly. Don't be nervous. Stop your hands from shaking. I need you to keep this guy, under the barrel of the gun in case he twitches. If this guy wasn't man enough to chain up John's feet, why do you think he's going to be the guy to hold the shotgun and shoot him if he twitches? So anyway, they do the countdown. 1, 2, 3. They start to do the switch where he's handing the shotgun over to the ex-boyfriend. John instantly grabs the barrel of the shotgun, moves it away from his head. The shotgun goes off, but doesn't hit John. And then John is able to dispatch. Does he kill Troy here? No, he kills Troy later. I'm sorry. So Troy and Chris get away, and John incapacitates the park ranger. Now, this is where I feel that I like John, because he is a fucking brutal guy. John could have easily killed the park ranger at this point with no problem whatsoever. But what he does is he breaks the park ranger's back so that he can't get away. So literally we see him, it looks like he's about to reach into his spine and pull his fucking spine out a la Sub-Zero. But he doesn't. All he does is he breaks his back. And then he walks away. The park ranger is still awake. We see his eyes open. They're moving around, but he's not talking. I don't know if he's lost the ability to speak, which doesn't really make sense, but whatever. He doesn't say anything else, for the rest of his life. And then, so John could have easily killed this guy, but instead he breaks his back, and then he goes into the shed and he turns on the log splitter. And this is the other amazing kill of this movie. I fucking love this. Like I said, the park ranger's back is broken. He cannot move. His eyes are open. He's aware, but he can't move. He can't do anything. So I, as a horror fan, when I see a log splitter, I assume that they're going to split the guy open. They're literally going to put him on there and split him open lengthwise, a la The Burning Moon, Olaf Eitenbach's movie, where they actually split a guy up the middle. But no, what he does is he actually takes the park ranger, who's very much still awake, and it's very much the live actor. Like I said, unless this is the greatest prosthetic with remote control eyes that I've ever seen, it's still the live actor. So he takes the park ranger's arm, puts it on the log splitter, turns on the log splitter, and again, no cuts, my friend. This is all one long shot. We see the log splitter move down into position and cut his arm off unceremoniously. Again, like I said, no cuts, single shot, fucking awesome. Then, and like I said, John, the park ranger is still awake. He doesn't react because, like I said, his back is broken. So he probably didn't even feel the arm getting cut off, which kind of works against John. Because like I said, John is so brutal that he didn't just kill this guy. He broke his back so that he could then torture him a little bit. But like I said, I don't think the park ranger felt anything because his back is broken. But, ask a doctor their opinion. Anyway, after cutting off his arm, he then places his head and neck on the log splitter. And once again, he turns on the log splitter. And once again, no cuts, no edits. We see the thing. And like I said, the actor is on the log and his eyes are still moving. It looks like it's the actor. And the fucking thing unceremoniously comes down and cuts his head off. And like I said, my friends, no cuts. One single long shot. So kudos to this movie for doing that, for not making as many of the kills in this movie off screen. Even though they already did more than I'd like to see off screen, the later kills definitely make up for it. So yeah, so the park ranger's head and arm are cut off and he is now dead. And all that's left is Chris and Troy. So this is when we see Chris and her ex-boyfriend with a tank of gas, like a canister of gas, and Chris has a Zippo in her hand. A Zippo that we've seen multiple times throughout the movie. So it's kind of funny. Usually when you see an inanimate object like that, it becomes a MacGuffin or it's foreshadowing something later. So the fact that we were seeing this Zippo lighter multiple times in the movie, as a seasoned horror fan, I figured, they're going to set John on fire with that Zippo later. But nope. Just as these two kids are trying to formulate a plan to get John into the trap, John shows up. And they know that John is there because we hear them say, oh shit, he's standing right there. And they're whispering like John is deaf or something, like he can't hear this. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I was talking about with getting to see this kind of stuff from the killer's angle is so cool. To know that, yes, the killer can hear you when you're whispering, you fucking idiot. Stop talking when the killer is around. So yeah. So the killer hears them say, okay, Troy basically says that he's going to be a distraction. He's going to run out and try to divert John's attention towards him so that Chris can then take the canister of gas and set up the trap at the fire tower. Unfortunately, they never get a chance because, and this is bad judgment on Troy's part. Troy, instead of coming out of the bush into the open, like 10, 20 feet away from John so that John will then give chase, this idiot shows up right behind John, literally 2 feet behind John, and says, hey, you ugly motherfucker. And you can tell that John, I don't know if John got mad at being called ugly or being called a motherfucker, because he unceremoniously destroys this guy. He takes the axe, buries it in his face against a tree. And again, no cuts. We're seeing this all. This scene isn't all one long shot, but at least the kill is on screen. He buries the hatchet into his face, and then we see the camera pan back to where Chris is standing, and Chris is frozen in fear. She's literally watching John bury this hatchet into Troy's head, I don't know, like 30, 40 times. I mean, literally, this had to be personal. I don't think John likes being called ugly because he literally sat there and kept hacking and hacking and hacking. And then when the camera pans back, it doesn't even look like a head anymore. It looks like just a pile of flesh and blood and bone. And John is still fucking hacking and hacking. Finally, Chris gets out of her frozen state, realizes that John is distracted because he's still hacking. Hack. So what she does is she puts down the tank of gas. She takes off the necklace because at this point she does realize that's what John is after. She takes off the necklace and she puts it on the gas tank. She hangs it on there so that it's very obvious. It's visible. It's there. And she runs away. Apparently, John doesn't notice her run away because we still hear the sound of the hacking in the background. I'm starting to think it was about 100 fucking hacks that John took at this guy, just over and over and over. And then finally, as Chris is running away, the sound of the hacking starts haunting her. She starts hearing it. And then the sounds of the woods themselves become loud, almost deafening. I'm not kidding. Like in the theater, I thought there was something wrong with the audio because literally just the ambient noises of the forest, the wind, the animals, the birds are just loud as fuck. And then over it the entire time is the hacking sound. Finally, it's the next morning. Literally, the sun is up. It's the next morning, and Chris is still running. She's still fucking running away. Somehow, I don't know how, we don't actually get to see it. Somehow she fell and got a twig, or well, a lot more than a twig, more like a branch, impaled through part of her lower leg, like near the shin area. Like I said, we don't see it. We have no fucking idea how it happened. It's just the camera suddenly is there. It's the next morning. She wakes up and she's got a fucking branch sticking through her shin. She pulls the thing out and starts and continues running away. Like I said, I have no idea how many miles away from, the original crime scene where John killed Troy she is at this point, but she's been literally running all night. Finally, she gets to a road and she just sits there. She doesn't walk. She literally just sits in the road, and then a truck actually comes down the road. And this is the final scene, folks. This is the scene that really irked the shit out of me. Okay, so the truck stops and there's an older woman driving. The woman obviously seems concerned for Chris. What's going on? Chris is obviously screaming, "Let's get out of here. Just let's go. Let's not stay." Like Chris just wants to get the fuck out of here. Finally, they take off. They're on the road, and the woman asks what happened. And this is where Chris changes her story. She doesn't tell the truth that they were stalked by this, undead killer John, and that all her friends are dead. She tells the woman that it was an animal attack. After telling the woman that it was an animal attack, she then goes into a 5-minute fucking story about her husband getting attacked by a bear and how he used to be a park ranger. He got a call that there was a wild bear. He went to the area, couldn't find the bear, and then suddenly the bear came out of nowhere, attacked him, bit him on the back of the head, and actually tried to drown him because they were in the water. They were in the river at that point. And the old woman says that somehow the bear let go. The bear must have thought that Bobby, the guy's name was Bobby. She goes, yeah, the bear must have thought that Bobby was dead, and that, and it just let go and left. And then there's more to the story where Chris then asks, did they ever get the bear? And, literally, I'm not kidding. It's like a 5-fucking-minute story. And 5 minutes may not sound like a lot, but when your movie's only 90 minutes and you're wondering where the fuck the killer is, no one wants to hear a 5-minute bear story. Now, I don't know about you guys. Did anybody start to think that she was working with John? Like the way that she was like she was rude to the girl at first because the girl was like, did you suspect anything? I suspected something.
So I suspected, when I was actually watching the movie, I suspected that the reason they were hanging on so long was because something else was going to eventually happen. So I definitely thought that. And I ended up reading an interview with the director, and they did ask him about the ending, and his explanation, and to me it doesn't make the ending better or worse, it just is his explanation is that he wanted to kind of model it on the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and like how awkward a conversation that would have been with Sally and the person who saved her, because it's like, how exactly what do you guys talk about on that awkward drive to the hospital? Okay. So that's what he was going for. Now it doesn't make it I wouldn't say it makes it better now, but just for some context of what he was going for.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you, Mike. I'm going to say that explanation makes it fucking worse. Because what you're not thinking about is that the driver in Texas Chainsaw Massacre saw Leatherface chasing her, saw this big hulking human being chasing Sally and the other truck driver, the semi-driver, with a chainsaw. this is not a similar situation because this old woman didn't see John. It doesn't even seem like she knows that there is a killer in these woods. So yeah, I'm going to say that director's an idiot. That's a terrible explanation. The conversation at the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre would have been a lot fucking different. It would have been, who the fuck was that guy with the chainsaw? I don't know. He killed all my friends. Okay, let me get you to the police station. No, I'm sorry. That conversation would be a lot different than this movie. So yeah, fuck you, Chris.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw is the wrong movie to go with because that guy, like Venom said, he literally stumbled upon the scene and saw everything.
Yeah, so again, it's a weak explanation by the director, but whatever. Like I said, I actually think it makes this ending worse. Anyway.
I get what he's going for, but I think Texas Chainsaw is the wrong one to point out for this example. I think the idea is fine, but Texas Chainsaw is the wrong film to go with.
Yeah, I think it's totally more agree. So from the context of the victim, because like the lady driving is like trying to have a conversation with her, and she's so out of and traumatized that it's kind of. But
the problem is that he's specifically choosing Texas Chainsaw, where the rescuer specifically saw what happened. He's a witness to it. It's not as if somebody who just randomly happened upon the scene and then, I'm going to take this victim that's been, who just walked out of the woods, who's bleeding profusely, and then trying to figure out what happened. I specifically saw what happened. I grabbed the victim in my car and we got away in the nick of time before they got killed. I think the idea is right, but I think they just picked the wrong movie as an example.
Yeah, it's true. I could think of a couple other movies where the final girl, is picked up by someone who did not see the events. That would have been a better example, but whatever. He went with Texas Chainsaw, so we'll live with it. Anyway, to finish off, basically, after the lady in the old lady in the truck tells the bear story, Chris falls asleep. She falls asleep in the front seat of the truck, and then the lady tries to wake her up, and she's not waking up. Then she looks down at one of her legs and realizes that Chris is bleeding, and she's bleeding pretty profusely. So she stops the truck. As soon as she stops the truck, Chris wakes up, and she's like, "Why are you stopping? Why are you stopping?" The lady explains to her, "I need to stop this bleeding. You're not going to make it to the hospital if I don't stop this bleeding." So the lady literally stops the truck, walks over to the passenger side, and starts to set up a tourniquet. At that point, as the old lady is setting up the tourniquet, Chris thinks that she sees something in the woods or hears something in the woods, because they're still in the woods. I'm not sure how long they've been driving, but they're still definitely in a wooded area. And she thinks that she hears something in the woods, though at this point it's probably PTSD, from everything that she'd gone through the night before, because nothing ever comes out of the woods. The camera literally just has a static, 1 minute shot just staring into the woods where Chris is staring into, and nothing comes out of the woods. We don't see anything move. Nothing is implied that it's there other than her staring into the woods. Then that shot cuts, and the final shot of the movie is the gas can. The gas can that she had left at the scene where Troy was killed. You remember that she left the necklace on the gas can. We see that the necklace is gone, and obviously John is gone at this point. I don't know if John automatically just goes away as soon as he gets the necklace back, or if he has to actually be manually put into the ground by someone, but literally, and then it goes black, and that's the end of the movie, folks. Literally a 10-minute worthless scene to end what was a fairly competent slasher, a fairly original slasher. Maybe it didn't hit on all cylinders. We've already talked about some of the issues that we had with it, but it's still a competent film. It's still watchable. Yes, you're going to get bored. If you're not into strolling through the woods scenes, you're going to get bored by the second act. But overall, it's a solid film with a terrible ending. And I don't care what explanation that director gives. This is a fucking terrible ending. This movie doesn't end. It just stops. We don't know what happened to John. We don't know if Chris got to the hospital. We don't know. It left so many open plot points that, like I said, I've seen movies like this before where there's no actual ending. It just kind of stops and the credits roll, and you have to accept that, okay, well, that's it. So, yeah, overall a competent film, not one that I think people need to see in theaters necessarily, especially since you only have to wait a month for the Shudder drop on July 4th. So I would say wait for the Shudder drop and then check it out, because this movie is definitely going to work for a lot of people more than I think it worked for us. I think just because we're older horror fans, because like I said, when I walked out of the theater, a lot of the younger fans were talking about how great it was and they loved it and they were on the edge of their seat the whole movie. And obviously I'm thinking to myself, what fucking movie did you watch that you were on the edge of your seat the whole time? But whatever. Like I said, this concept will work for some horror fans more than others, but still worth watching, though I would probably say wait for Shudder. And that's it for me.
All right. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I can see both sides of it, the support it in the theater or the just wait. It's a tough call on this one just because.
I would say if you have like some kind of like program where you can, you're paying a monthly fee and then you can go see movies, a certain amount of movies, I'd say go see it then. Like if you're not paying any extra out of pocket. But if you have to pay like $20-$25 to see this movie out of pocket, I would say it's not worth it. I would say wait for Shudder. Wait for the Shudder drop. But yeah, if you have AMC A-List or the Regal Pass or whatever, yeah, go see it. Fuck it.
Cool. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Fresh Cuts. And let's find out if there's anything for people to listen to from us other than our own shows or our main shows or whatever. So Venom, anything to report?
Only one thing, and I think it's the same thing I talked about last week. It is Creature Comforts, episode 26 is available as we speak. We took a look at, we did a tribute to Roger Corman, who, passed away in May. Talked about some of our favorite movies of his, talked about some of his influence on other directors and actors. And then for the feature review, we looked at his 1959 creature feature classic, The Wasp Woman, which was a fun conversation. Good episode all around. I thought everybody brought some great points, great Corman movies to the table. His Hammer run with the Edgar Allan Poe movies was discussed, his creature features, some of his later stuff like that he produced, some of the sci-fi original stuff. So yeah, just a good, fun little tribute to Mr. Roger Corman, a man that we will miss. But as I say on the show, he left us with almost 500 credits. Yes, my friends, look at his IMDb. The man has almost 500 movies under his title, and he still has 2 more coming out. There's still 2 in pre-production. This man was 98 years old, working in the industry for over 60 years, and he still has 2 movies coming out after his death. I mean, if that's not a workhorse of cinema, I don't know what is. So, yeah, God bless, Satan bless, whoever Roger Corman believed in. Rest well. You left us with an indelible legacy, and I appreciate everything he did for us. Even the movies that maybe aren't as good as some of his others are still enjoyable. So yeah, tune in for our Roger Corman tribute on Creature Features episode 26. And hopefully we can get the main show recorded before the end of this weekend. If not, hopefully we'll get it out in the next week or so. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. It's been pretty light. A lot of stuff going on here. We had more family emergencies, more people getting rushed to the hospital. So yeah, my movie watching has been suffering and my podcasting has been suffering. So hopefully, things turn around sooner than later. But yeah, that's all from me, folks.
All right. How about you, Don?
Yeah, not much. As mentioned, the latest episode of Creature Comforts is available. The Corman retrospective was indeed a lot of fun, and again, sad that we left him. He left us under these circumstances, but at least we got a fun movie out of it and a fun discussion. So check that out. The episode of No Bodies podcast that I was on, I think it turned out to be one because I think I saw that there's a new episode out. So mine was just indeed a one shot. They usually do they usually split their episodes into 2-parters, but I think mine was just a one. It was a look at religious horror. So we did various religious horror topics and fun conversations. So go ahead and check that one out. It's available under No Bodies podcast. That's 2 words, no and bodies. So available wherever you find your shows. And this is a release week for Horror Countdown. We're winding down our season. I think we've got 2 or 3 more episodes left to go before the season runs out. So this is one of the later episodes. It is horror films with more than 2 survivors. So pretty
Nice.
fun topic. Yeah, I did try to limit it to zombie films just because I think that's kind of an obvious one, but it was a pretty fun time. Some fun films were brought up, and funnily enough, my guest and we legitimately tied on several of our points, even though we weren't really expecting it to, just the way it happened. But fun time. Basically, catch it wherever you can, usual places. And lastly, again, my first short story, Scream for the Holidays, is available on the Horror Tree. Just search the website horrortree.com and scroll for me, search for me or the story title. You can find it pretty easily. So yeah, looking to get more of that out into the world, starting on my second short story this weekend. So keep an eye out for that when it drops. But I guess beyond that, not much else.
Okay. As far as I go, nothing new yet. We should be recording the main show soon. And I'm trying to think. I don't have anything on the near horizon, but stuff I'll probably announce at a later time. As far as our next episode of Fresh
Under Paris. We're not even
Oh.
discussing this. Under Paris. It drops Tuesday.
Are we
there's
skipping the Watchers? We have a theatrical
Yeah,
release.
because
this
I was
week.
saying Watchers also releases this week, and
Oh, fuck me.
But-
there's nothing theatrical next week though, so maybe we
But
can.
the thing
I
is-
guess.
yeah,
I
because
guess.
the thing is,
Yeah.
we have the option to do 2
If it's
because
theatrical,
of the,
fuck it. Just go ahead and go with Watchers.
No, but
But it's after
what I'm
Paris
saying is
after
we still have the option to do Under Paris as like a bonus episode, or at least get it recorded early because of the trip that I'm taking. That'll kind of make me on odd
Oh, that's right.
timing. So
Ooh, okay, that works.
yeah,
We'll have to do 2 episodes next week anyway. No, that's awesome. I like it.
yeah,
that
so
works.
we can still work it out. So
Awesome.
yeah, we'll figure out exactly how we are formulating it, but yeah, that could be how it works. So anyways, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We'll be back in a week's time with another one. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
Next time, make the killer talk so the movie is at least a little more interesting.
Peace.